Namaste and welcome back to the JavaScript series. Today we are going to be discussing an extremely important concept in JavaScript which many beginners are totally confused by, which directly affects their understanding of JavaScript, right? The concept is none other than pass by value and pass by reference. Now please try to understand, when you're using JavaScript, when a value within one variable is passed to another variable, it can be done in two ways. One is by its value, another is by its reference. Now this is a fundamental concept which everybody should know, and hence let's directly dive deep into the concept, right? Let me begin with the first one, which is pass by value, right? This is very straightforward, easy to understand. Let me show you what I mean. So if in case I just bring my editor in front of you for reference, try to understand. Let us assume I go and create one variable a whose value happens to be 1000 like this, or 100. Clear? Now please try to understand. What I'm trying to say is very simple. This is only the variable a, and inside it there is a value called as 100. 100 is nothing but a value. Now what I'm going to do is, in the next line I'm going to create an empty variable called as b. Now this is only b. And in JavaScript, a variable is not essentially empty. If an empty variable is created, you have a value inside it called as undefined. So I'm just placing it there for your reference. But what I want you to understand now is, in the next line, I want to take whatever is there in A and pass that value to B. This is only called as pass by value. Passing a value inside one variable to another variable is only called as pass by value. How are we going to do this? Very simple, using assignment. So I'll tell to B, please assign whatever is there inside A. And for those of you who are beginners in programming, always try to understand assignment works from right to left. I am assigning A to B, not B to A, right? Great. Now what are we trying to do? Now let me just print and show you, and if I have to visualize it for you, whatever is inside A, if I pass it to B, what is there inside A? 100. 100 gets passed to B. Now both A and B have the same value, 100. To prove that, I would just like to go and print the value of A, and I would also like to print the value of B. If I were to do this and if I were to execute and show you, clearly you can see in both cases it is 100 and 100 that we see as values, right? Amazing. So pass by value is clear. Now one important thing to note about pass by value is, in pass by value you have two variables, right, with the same value, but they're two different copies. Now if I change one, the other doesn't get affected. What I mean to say is, if I were to now go to the next line and say to B, please assign 200 like this. Now please try to understand, one variable at any given point of time has the capability to store only a single variable or a single value. Sorry, a single value it will be able to store. Now already it has a value which is 100. That 100 now gets replaced by 200. I hope you're able to understand. So now A is 100, B is 200. Now just because I changed B doesn't mean A changes, right? Why will A change? A is an independent copy, B is an independent copy. And to prove that, if I were to just go here now, and if in case I were to just duplicate these lines and print it again, I'm again printing the value of A and B. Now if in case I were to go here, clear the screen and re-execute my program, now you can see A is very much still 100, but B, my dear friends, is 200. I hope you're able to understand. So just to help you build an intuition, just to help you build a visualization of pass by value, what I'm trying to say is just this much. Assume I have a piece of document with me, a paper in which something is written. I now take a Xerox of it, or photocopy. So I put it inside the Xerox machine and I take a Xerox. Now once I get a Xerox or a photocopy, now I have two copies of the document. One is the original, one is the photocopy. Now please try to understand, how much ever changes I make in the photocopy, does it affect the original? No. It only changes the Xerox. It doesn't even touch the original. I hope you're able to understand. Similarly, if I do some changes in the original, it doesn't affect the photocopy. So this is one way to look at it. Whatever was there in the original only, you have put inside the photocopy, right? But After that initial transfer of data, if you change anything here, it doesn't affect the original copy. So this is one way to build an intuition of pass by value, right? Very simple, very straightforward. But now this is where things get really interesting in JavaScript. Because please try to understand, my dear friends, in JavaScript as a programmer, you will be working with two types of values always. One is called as primitives, in which all these different fellows come, primitives. A number is a primitive. I hope you will understand. A Boolean value is a primitive. All these are primitives. I'm giving you the entire list. All these are primitives, right? On the other end, you have objects. Object itself means something which is not primitive, something which is a real world entity. In JavaScript, it is nothing but key value pairs. I have spoken about this in detail in the previous discussion. If you haven't watched it, please go look at it once more, right? And under objects, definitely we have objects, and try to understand, functions are also objects in JavaScript. Arrays are also objects in JavaScript. Strings are also objects in JavaScript. How will you understand? Because we have two types of values that we'll be working with, the moment you work with objects and you try to pass the value inside one object to another object, now pass by reference comes into the picture. Something different happens. Now, the best way to understand is by visualizing. Let's get to it, okay? Now, those of you who have been attending the sessions regularly, you know how to create an object in JavaScript. There are multiple ways. The easiest way is the object literal notation, which begins by you putting parenthesis and a semicolon like this. Clear? Now, what is an object notation? Key value pairs. Assume I want to create a simple car object, right? So the first key value pair would be the name, and let us assume the value is BMW. Next would be the cost, which is probably 75.6. Next would be the mileage, which is again around maybe some random value 8.9. Please don't quote me on this. And here I've made a mistake. Object value pairs should always be separated not by semicolons. It should be using commas like this. Don't forget these things, okay? Right. Now, I can also create functions as key value pairs, but I don't want functions. Just 3 pieces of data is enough for me, or properties is enough. Behavior is not required in this example. I will come here and I will be giving this a reference. I will call this as let C1. I'm just calling it as C1, right? Wonderful. Now, if I were to go here and say console.log and I try to print C1 directly, you can see the output looks something like this. Just a moment. Right. The output looks something like this. If I execute it, you can see directly it shows this is an object, key value pairs. And you know, individually you can access each key and its value also. How do you do that? That is very simple. Instead of directly saying C1, you can say C1.name, in which case it accesses the name, prints its value, right? Similarly, you can also say C1.cost. Similarly, you can also cost, right? Similarly, you can also say C1.mileage like this. And now if I were to clear the screen and re-execute this code, you can notice it will be one by one, right? So I've shown you all this in the previous class. Now the point here is, what if now I go to my program and do something unique? I want you to observe this, okay? So in the next line, I'll now create one more variable called as C2. I'm just creating a variable. Now please try to understand, in the next line, what if I tell like this, whatever is there in C1, please assign it to C2 like this. In the previous example also, the value inside a variable was passed to another variable. In this example also, the value inside one variable is being passed to another variable. The last example was passed by value, but this example is an example for pass by reference, because this works in a completely different fashion. What do you mean, you may ask? Now, I have one question to the viewers of this video. Please tell me, my friend, do you think when I tell let C2, Am I creating another car object? Yes or no? Am I creating another car object? Yes or no? This is my question to you. Take a minute to analyze it. You may pause the video as well. Wonderful. So I hope you lock down on whatever your answer may be, right? I'll move this aside. Now, please try to understand one thing, right? 150% in this particular example, I have not created another object. What do you mean, you may ask? Visualization and memory is the key to understanding complex programming topics. Let's understand this. In this example, if you have to grasp whatever I'm saying, then I need to bring the two memory segments which always helps us in JavaScript. One being the stack and the other being the heap. The first thing that happens in every JavaScript program is when execution begins, something called as a global execution context is created. This global execution context will always have two parts. One is called as the creation phase, another is called as the execution phase. In the creation phase, the first thing that happens is hoisting happens within our code. What do you mean by hoisting? Hoisting is the process of identifying all the variable and function declarations in your program and moving it to the top of its scope. This I have already in depth discussed previously. Now please try to understand, JavaScript now goes and recognizes, hey, this is one declaration, right? Variable declaration. This is one more variable declaration. Now what it will do is, it will split this into two lines. It will make it like this, let C1 and then C1 equal to like this. It will split the declaration and initialization into two parts, right? Now the declaration it will take and hoist it to the top. Already it is at the top. And what is the top of its scope? Global scope. Those of you who watch the scope video, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. This is global scope, right? It is hoisted to the top. Similarly, it sees this is also declaration. This also it will take and hoist it to the top. I hope you're able to understand. So this is how your code now essentially looks. Now the next thing that happens in the creation phase is the declarations are now allocated memory within the creation phase inside the global execution context, which means memory for C1 is allocated, memory for C2 is allocated. Wonderful. The rest of the lines is what will be present within the execution phase. I'm not putting it all here, but I hope you're able to understand what I'm saying. Beautiful. Now the execution begins from this line. Declarations are over. Now watch it all of you. Assignment means first execute whatever is there in the right hand side, then only go to the left hand side. When I come to the right hand side, JavaScript observes a syntax of parenthesis with a semicolon. Immediately JavaScript knows this is an object literal notation, and hence we are trying to create an object. Objects in JavaScript are always allocated memory on the heap, and the moment you put these brackets and semicolon, a brand new block of memory is created on the heap with an address. Let us assume the address is 1000. I've told you it's an imaginary value. The address could be anything. Now what happens if you ask me? It's very, very simple. Inside the object, I have these key value pairs which are now allocated as variables within the object. Name is allocated, value is assigned as BMW. Cost is allocated, value is 75.6. Mileage is allocated, value as 8.9. Understood what I'm trying to say? Beautiful. Object is ready, which means now this right hand side is done. Execution is done. Now what happens is this address 1000 is taken and given to the left hand side or the LHS. And what is there in left hand side? C1. Now C1 is a variable, correct? But what is this variable going to store? This variable is going to now store the address of the object. It's not storing a value like a number or a real number. It's not storing or a character or 0 or 1. It's not storing some number, right? It's literally storing an address. Now a variable which stores the address of an object is only called as a reference variable. A variable which stores the address of an object is only known as a reference variable. And a reference variable always and always points to the address which it is holding. In this case, it points to 1000, which is this object. In the language of C and C++, we call this as a pointer. A pointer is a variable which stores the address of a location in the memory, right? Anyways, let's not digress into the discussion of C and C++, but reference and pointer essentially means the same thing. They hold addresses and they point to the address, right? Beautiful. Is this much clear to all of you? Now in the next line, watch it, C1 dot name. What will get printed? BMW. C1 dot cost, 75.6. C1 dot mileage, 8.9. Simple. This you will see on the screen. After which, now the next line. This is the most important line. Whatever is there in C1, assign it to C2. Now please look at C1 carefully. What is there inside C1? 1000. Is 1000 value or address? In our discussion, 1000 is an address. Hence, address present inside one variable is now going to be assigned to another variable. And passing address from one variable to another variable, or passing the address present inside one reference variable to another, is only in hi-fi words called as pass by reference. Pass by reference. Yes? And hence the same address comes and sits inside C2. So what does C2 hold now? 1000, which is the address. Now, when address inside one variable is passed to another, something unique happens in JavaScript. Same happens in Java. Same happens in Python also. Both these references will now start pointing to the same address or the same object. Hence, please try to understand, object is 1, reference is pointing to it is 2. Object is 1, reference is pointing to it is 2. Now the natural question that comes to a person's mind is, can an object have multiple references? Yes, 150% allowed. You can have 1, you can have 100 references. If multiple variables are storing the same address, they will naturally be pointing to the same object, and hence one object can have multiple references. This must seep into the brains of people trying to understand JavaScript. Otherwise, JavaScript totally becomes an utter confusion for everyone. Understood? I hope this much is clear to everyone. Okay, great. Next, what happens, you may ask. Now watch it. Hence, now, how you have to visualize this is, object is 1, references are 2. Now, to give you an idea of what I am trying to say here, what I want to do is very simple. Let me give you a sort of visualization, okay? Imagine, this is a locker. This is a locker, lockers, bank lockers, you have your lockers in your, restrooms, etc. It's a locker. Now let us assume for this locker there is a key, okay? Now what I am doing is, I am going to duplicate this key. I am going to duplicate this key. Now please try to understand, my locker is 1, but I have 2 keys. Now this key and this key open the same locker. This key and this key open the same locker. So it doesn't matter whether I use the first key or the second key. Ultimately, I can only access the same locker. Locker is same, keys are many. This is one way to visualize multiple references, right? Object is 1, references are many. I hope you're able to understand. Great. And if this has become clear to all of you, now what I want to show you is, let me see how well you have understood. Now I will go here and say console.log, and now I will say c2.name. If you are focusing, you will easily see what is there inside C2? 1000. I'll reach the same object. Dot, I will enter. C2.name. What is there in the name? BMW. Same BMW gets printed because C1 and C2 are the same object. It is the same car. The same car, I call it C1, you call it C2, but the car doesn't change. Understand what I'm trying to say? Similarly, if I were to go here and if I were to make it C2.cost, same thing, C2.mileage, same thing. I hope you will understand. And hence, to prove this to you, if I execute, observe carefully, this is C1.name, C1.cost, C1.mileage. This is C2.name cost mileage. Both the outputs are same because both are actually the same object. It's just that you can refer it using 2 names in the program. Understood? Pass by reference, which means now try to understand. Now comes an important point. Now what if I go here and say C2.name equal to, maybe I will call it as Kia, like this. Now I want to ask a very simple question to you. I am saying c2.name equal to Kia, right? After which, observe this, I will say console.log, I will say c2.name. Now if in case I do this, what is going to happen? Watch this carefully. Assign Kia to whom? c2.name. What is c2.name? c2 means 1000, I'll reach here. Dot enter. Enter and access what? Name. To name I'm assigning Kia. Now one variable can store only one value, hence BMW gets erased and what gets stored is Kia. How you understand? Obviously now if I tell c2.name, what gets printed? BMW will not get printed, Kia gets printed. Observe this carefully. I'll go here and execute. Clearly you can notice Kia. Now the larger question is, if I come here and if in case I now were to duplicate this line and say c1.name, pause, think and answer, what will be the output? Will it be BMW or will it be Kia? I hope all of you selected the right answer, which is Kia. Why? Though you say C1, please understand, change was performed using C2. But if you change C2, obviously it changes C1 because C2 and C1 are the same. C2 and C1 are the same. Hope you will understand, which means now if I say C1.name, 100% modification would have happened and you can see you will get Kia itself. Kia itself. This is the most important concept that you must understand when we are trying to discuss the concept of pass by value and pass by reference. Just to give you a picture, please try to understand. In pass by value, value present in one variable, we will pass it to another. Now you have two copies of the same value, but in two different variables. You change one, the other doesn't change because they are two different copies. But in pass by reference, the word reference means object. So what happens is, we have one object and we have two references. Now both the references have the same address. Address present in one reference variable is assigned to another, is why both are referring to the same object. Understand what I'm trying to say? Now if you perform change using one reference variable, it affects the other because ultimately both are referring to the same object. Is this much clear to all of you? I hope pass by value and pass by reference has become clear. Now merging all these concepts together, we will explore JavaScript even more in depth. Thank you so much for listening, and as usual, a small request to like, subscribe and comment on the channel. It really helps us to produce more such valuable content for you. And most certainly, YouTube is a game of algorithm. The algorithm recognizes that this is valuable content and will certainly sort of showcase it to other people also in need. Thank you so much for listening. See you in the next class.